Okay, here's a brief little rundown on the hardware that I'm using for this particular type of performance. I have my launch pad, and my launch pad will be controlling the triggering of tracks for both the full compositions as well as the parts that I have to trigger. In the set itself, I have full compositions, full songs that are basically just DJ'd, and then I have elements that I can either add on to the track as like extra drums, extra synth lines, or I can even compose my own live jam with I have kick and bass in there and the ability to play my bass, sequence my bass live. If I've got this set up where I've got a special controller script that gives me added control, and one of the added controls is being able to step sequence MIDI clips inside of Ableton Live. And right now, for this type of performance, I have it set up to be a dedicated lock to one clip, and that's my bass synth for all the live performance bass lines. So I can just put in notes as I see fit. And to do that, I gotta disable the polyphonic, and I can just change them around. These are 2-beat sections, so I can sequence in the realm of 2 beats. That's visible to me, but then I can link larger sections by holding one end and the other. So this is actually 1 bar, 2.5 bars right here. Or I can just have it be 1 beat, 1 bar, whatever. So this gives me some really good flexibility. I also have the ability to, I'm using my, for my main mixer controls type of setup and navigation, I'm using the Fader Fox UC4, and I've got it set up using the native scripts. There's no added scripting that's done for this one. It's just the stock one that comes with it because it's very functional. So what I have it set up to do is my bottom buttons will switch between tracks once I set that up. So now if you look over it live, whenever I'm changing a button, a different track becomes highlighted, which will allow for me to control macros on the first devices that I have set up on each of those channels. So it makes it really easy to switch what channel I want to be focusing on for either messing around with effects or adding new sounds. For instance, I have for my channel 7, for instance, I have what I call trigger sounds, where I'm using a drum rack and I'm just triggering sounds. And these are all synths, actually. These are all mostly VST instruments. There's a couple of samplers in there where I'm taking like a bass sound, like a very raw waveform, and doing some basic synthesis on it, some filtering, some pitch modulation, whatever. So there's a little bit of that going on, and I've got some audio tracks up here. They're just like audio clips that have been put into simpler and chopped up to where anytime I press one of these, it'll play a chunk of a synth line and it'll jump around in that synth line. So it's not always the same exact part every time I press it. I've got 4 channels of that, and those are what I'm going to be mainly adding in on the synth aspect of things. I also am going to be using my iPad, and I'm charging it right now, but when I do the full run through in probably an hour or so, or a little bit later, I will have this charged. But right now what I've got it doing, it's gonna do a couple of things. I've got the iMPC Pro app, the older version, not the newer version, because this is an old iPad. And I've loaded it up with each pad has its own sound. There's some drum sounds, some one-shots and atmospheric, some just little added flavor to add in here. And so there's 64 sounds that I can add. I've created a full 4 kits of 16 sounds, so that's 64 sounds that can be added throughout the course of the performance for this one. And then I have a couple of other devices, which I have the TC11, which uses the touchscreen interface to modulate different synthesis parameters on the synth itself, because it's got a little internal synth that's relatively powerful. You can get some pretty interesting patches with this thing. I'll probably design a few more patches for the performance, because this is the type of stuff I can design sounds on the flight. So this has got patches where it, you know, just, it's all about having this interaction, because depending on how I touch it, it might create a different effect. There's also one that just sends MIDI data for synths, and I was thinking about running that, but I'm gonna be switching between too many different applications as it is. In fact, with this TC11, I have a version of it on my iPhone, and I'll probably be using the iPhone version of it so I don't have to switch between 3 things on the iPad. I only want to deal with 2. So the other thing that I have here for the iPad is this thing called Sampler, which allows you to play back audio files in various different interesting ways. I'll probably be recording a little bit of audio for this today. I think I have my son this evening, so I'm probably going to sample him talking about what all the cool things that happened to him over the holiday break. And that'll be great sample fodder, because I can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different clips in here, different audio files in here, and manipulate them in a few different ways. So it's just good stuff to add in real time that's not necessarily timing specific, even though you can record, like, you can record your performance and it can loop. I'm not going to be using that capability because this is an older app and it doesn't have Ableton Link. So I'm not going to worry about that. This is just adding sounds real time, just, you know, extra flavor. Then I've got the synth lines, I've got these extra sounds that I can play, these little one shots. And then I also have over here, this is my launch control. And my launch control is doing double duty. It's going to be very integral in the selection of what songs in my full compositions will be played. Because I'll show you when we get over to the actual script, or the actual Ableton Live set, what I've got set up to a certain degree. And it's using CliffX Pro, so it's using some extra scripting that's kind of some ninja action. But in this particular, it's got 2 setups that I'm currently rocking. If I have it on Factory 3, this functions primarily as macro control, where these first 8 knobs will control the 8 knobs on a macro rack inside of Ableton Live. And then I have these other 8 knobs hard mapped to 8 other particular things. I think I have done that here. Otherwise I've done it in the user. But in this particular, when it's in this particular layout, these first 2 buttons are DJ related. This is take the selected clip that I've selected and load it into the first empty slot in deck A. This is take the selected clip and load it into the first empty slot in deck B. And then these buttons are to trigger basically drum patterns, where I have a few basic drum patterns. They're just good to add on for quick movement, quick development of a song or of a sense of a groove, so it's actually like progressing forward. And so I have that at the touch of a button. I don't have to, if I'm jamming out in some other fashion on my launch pad, for instance, and I want to launch drums, I don't have to jump into a different view just to launch those drums. And also on the inverse, when we go to the user section, I've got this set up to user template 8, just for the sake of ease. And this I have set to 8 particular parameters. It's kind of hardwired as well to the first 8 macro knobs on this trigger rack. And then there's 8 more knobs that are changing sounds on these trigger racks, that these chains, where they're just switching the instrument that's playing. So it's not the same instrument that you're playing throughout the entire set. So those knobs are dedicated to that, and then these buttons down here will actually play. Those will play said will play 8 sounds. Actually 9, because I got one more in here. Gotta remember that. So I can basically play all my synth lines on this if I need to, while I'm, for instance, on here trying to set up drums to play or bringing in new elements via triggering. So I can basically have both hands are busy, but one's playing and the other one is like basically arranging in other parts to provide forward momentum and so on and so forth. This is a pretty simple setup for the most part. I'm not bringing any hardware synthesizers with me this time. This is all being done mainly with software synthesizers and a few third-party, like a couple of iPad apps, and they're just generating sounds and things are routed. I'm routing the audio. I'm just not even using an audio interface, so it's kind of a little dirty sounding, but for this non-mission critical stuff, it's okay. I've got a noise gate on, so it's not really noisy that much when it's idle, so we're good. So while this is charging, I'm gonna go ahead and the next bit will explain what's going on in the software aspect of things, and then a little bit later, we will go ahead and I will do a test run of this. I'm going to be recording this as a backup just in case something goes wrong. So I'm actually going to be recording a full 6 hours. However, what you guys will get to see will be broken up over the course of a few weeks. Mainly because, for one, I don't think it's really fair for me to like do this 6 hour set and put it out there ahead of when I'm going to be performing this for the first time in Brazil. It's not very fair to the dancers. It's not very fair to those organizers as well. So I'll just start with a little teaser this week, and then more will come after the new year. So this is it for what I have set up going on for the hardware. Unfortunately, during the recording period, I will not be able to record what's going on the actual physical gear because I don't have a place to hold a camera and the setup that I have. So I'm just going to be playing, and you guys won't get to see what I'm doing on the controllers, but I've kind of told you what's going on with the controllers for the most part. So here's hoping that you guys just get a good idea of what's going on, and you guys just learn about some of the things that you can do. This is a complex set, but also not super complex as well, where the intention is not to recreate any of my finished songs. Whatever I'm doing in real time will either add on to what I've already done, or I'm gonna be creating something completely new, where I kind of have an idea what will happen because I've set up like mini arrangements of the basic elements, like the basic drums and like when the kick's gonna play and how long the bass will play and little mutes there to make it sound like a cohesive track. But other than that, I don't know what else is gonna happen. It's all depending on spur of the moment and how we're feeling. So yeah, this is the end of what I'm doing for the hardware version. Next, we'll talk about the software.